Welcome to my studio. Today I want to introduce you to the palette of colors that I use, the 8 basic colors that I use for most of my watercolor paintings. If you have a basic palette that will go in different directions, lean in different directions, you can make many different colors without having a lot of separate tubes of color. So I want to show you how this works, and the way that we'll do that today is by making a color wheel, at least initially. And then later on, there'll be another video that you could look at to extend this color just a little bit further, adding a few lighter tones of the colors that I use for different reasons. And I'll explain that at a later time. So let's just go over to the table now and we'll take a look at these basic colors. And I'm starting with the idea of a color wheel because it helps you to understand how to mix your colors. And mixing colors is one of the things that happens when you first start to paint. It's a difficult thing to remember because you're not quite sure where to go and how to mix the colors and which colors make which particular colors. With this basic palette, it's much easier to understand how to mix your colors. So that's why I want to show you what happens today. In your video, you will have a handout that gives you the copy of the diagram for the color wheel and tells you a little bit about how to mix those colors. And I'll go through that a little bit later. There are 2 sides to this diagram. One on this side, and then on the back side of the color wheel, you're actually going to put in different colors. And so it's going to look a little bit like this when you've finished. Okay, so you're going to have a front side and a back side to the color wheel. And I have mine drawn out already, waiting to show you. But I just want to introduce you to these 8 colors. And this is from my journal. And we'll just open this up and we'll find the color wheel. And we'll take a look at this 8 color palette. Okay, and the 8 color palette consists of 2 earth tones that don't belong or we don't use so much in the color wheel, but we use those to add to the colors that are on the color wheel. The color wheel colors are 2 yellows, 1 cooler yellow that leans towards green tone, if you like, 1 warmer yellow that leans towards orange, 2 reds, 1 warmer red that leans towards orange, and a cooler red that leans towards purple, and 2 blues. And the 2 blues, this is a slightly warmer blue that leans towards purple, and this is a little bit of a cooler blue that leans towards green. So the names of those colors, not too difficult to remember, and I usually use the initials of the colors, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. The first color that we're going to use here, the first earth tone, is a very transparent gold, and it's called raw sienna, and it's a light color on a tonal range from light to dark. This is a light tone. The next color is burnt sienna, and it's a sort of orange brown, and that's a middle tone. Okay, and those 2 are the earth tones that complement the primary colors. The primary colors are yellow, red, and blue. And if we have those 3 colors in different varieties, we can actually make pretty much anything that we want to. And I'll show you along the way how that works. And all of the videos that you'll see on my site are painted with these colors. Occasionally I add in at the intermediate level 1 or 2 different colors just to extend the palette a little bit. Colors that we can't quite make with these, but pretty much everything in what I paint is made from these colors. So the yellow that we're going to use here is a light tone. It's a cool yellow, and it's called Hansa Yellow, and I usually buy the light version of that, Hansa Yellow Light. And Daniel Smith works pretty well for that. Sennelier makes one of those too. Da Vinci makes a lemon yellow that is the same as this. So it's a lemon tone of yellow. The next yellow that I'm going to look at is cadmium yellow. Cadmium yellow is, again, a light tone. Both yellows are light. In the tone of light to dark, as we go across here, this is much lighter than this. Okay, so the midtones stand out as being midtones, the darks stand out as being darks, and the lights stand out as being lights. Okay, So we talk in terms of tone when we're painting, as well as the color, because it's important to know how light or how dark the tones that you're using will be. So this is cadmium yellow. This is raw sienna. Let me just put these up here too. And a little bit of burnt sienna. For these two colors, I prefer to use Winsor Newton brand. And the reason for that is because they're particularly transparent. Many other manufacturers on burnt sienna and raw sienna are not transparent. And because these two are nicely transparent, we can make a lot of other colors with them. So I always buy Winsor Newton raw sienna and burnt sienna. For the Hansa yellow, it doesn't matter quite so much, providing it's a lemon yellow, okay? And so I usually use Daniel Smith for that, or Sennelier for that. And for the rest of the colors, I use Winsor Newton, but not for any particular reason. Most of the other manufacturers will be similar. The cadmium yellow, though, in Winsor Newton will be a little warmer like this than some manufacturers. So again, if you stay with the same manufacturer, you'll find it much easier to mix colors. I'm not suggesting that you have to buy colors from Winsor Newton, but if you keep changing manufacturers, your color mixtures will change, and then it'll be a little frustrating. Okay, for the red, I'm using cadmium red, and cadmium red is a warm orange red. You can see that very clearly. Now, cadmium red is a little toxic. You don't want to get it in your mouth or let your cats lick it. They have now started to develop a cadmium-free red, and I've tested those, and they work just as well. Cadmium red and cadmium yellow can be substituted by cadmium yellow-free and cadmium red-free, if you wish. Permanent Rose is a very strong, transparent, pinkish red, okay, a cool red, a red that leans towards purple. And so that one comes right here. French ultramarine. I use the French ultramarine rather than ultramarine because it's just a little bit warmer in color. So it leans more towards purple, a little bit stronger and warmer. And Prussian blue is the last color. Prussian blue is a cooler, greener blue, okay? Blue that kind of leans towards turquoise, leans towards green, if you like. So those are the 8 colors that I use for just about everything that I paint. And I found over the years when I've been teaching people to paint that it's much easier to get used to just a few colors and then possibly extend and add a few more. And a lot of those I just keep in the tube for occasional use, but initially we can make just about everything we need with these 8 colors. Okay, so I'm going to put those away, and we'll take away the journal, and we'll take a look at what we're going to do today. Okay, so in your packet you will have the copy of the color wheel. You're going to want to transfer that to your watercolor paper, and the way that you can do that easily is just to tape it on a window. Tape that on the window, tape your watercolor paper on top, and you'll be able to see that diagram through the paper, and you can just copy it on top. Okay, so that's the first thing that you'll need to do. When you've done that, you'll notice that there are lots and lots of things written on this particular diagram. And I'm going to go through those as we go along because they look a little complicated, but actually once you see what's happening, it's pretty easy. They just tell you where to put the colors. And so what I normally do right at the beginning is to take a look at those and decide where the colors go. So the reds go at the top here. And if you look at my color wheel, you can see the 2 reds go at the top here. The 2 blues go over here, and they're marked with R and B, red and blue. And the yellows go over here. So we have 2 of each primary color, 2 reds, 2 blues, and 2 yellows. And the theory is that if we have the primaries, we can make anything, which is true to a great extent. Okay, down here it tells you the primary colors are red, blue, and yellow. We are using 2 different primary colors that each lean towards their secondary color. Okay, now I'll talk about that in just a second. But the colors that we're using to paint these, this is where the cadmium red goes, and it's a warm red. See the W up there that says warm? And this is where the permanent rose goes, and that's a cool red. So where it says W, it means warm, and where it says C, it means cool. And the same thing happens down here, where the blue says warm, that's ultramarine blue, UB, ultramarine blue. And I usually write that in letters, in words, so that you can remember which color to put in which place. And Prussian blue is a cooler blue, and the yellows, Hansa yellow is the cool yellow, and cadmium yellow is the warm yellow. We're going to be mixing these colors together in the direction of the arrows to make secondary colors. The secondary colors are the colors that we make by mixing two primary colors together. In the middle, between these two colors, we will get, if we mix red with yellow, we will get orange. In this particular third, if we mix a different red, a cooler red, with blue, we will get violet or purple. And if we mix a different blue down here with a different yellow, we will get green. Okay. Now the reason that I'm using this double primary palette is because I struggled with color mixing for many years when I first started, and was very frustrated because I couldn't get the colors that I liked. And then I discovered a book that was called Blue and Yellow Don't Make Green. And that opened my eyes probably about 20 odd years ago now, to the idea of using a double primary palette. So 2 reds, 2 yellows, and 2 blues. And that really allows you to mix any colors that you like. And so it's been absolutely my staple for color mixing for a long, long time. So we're going to actually mix these up, and I'm going to show you how to make this color wheel. But let's take a look at what we need today as far as the brushes go. We need a number 8 brush pretty much for the color wheel. We'll keep a 10 and a 6 handy just in case we need to make smaller areas. All right, so we'll put those to one side. Usually I use a number 8 brush for pretty much everything, a number 8 round brush. You're going to need your color palette. And when you first start to paint, it's a good idea to put your paints in the palette, squeeze the tube into the palette, fill up the spaces with the colors. Now you can see I've got a few more colors than the 8 in here. This is a travel palette, so I carry a few more colors just to make it faster when I'm outside. And so, or when I'm demonstrating it, sometimes it's just a little easier to have a faster mix of colors. The 2 reds that I'm going to use are here, permanent rose and cadmium. The 2 yellows are here, Hansa yellow and cadmium yellow. The 2 blues are here, ultramarine blue and Prussian blue. And the 2 earth tones are here, raw sienna, and here, burnt sienna. So basically we're going across my palette just to pick up those 8 colors. Okay. When you've filled up your palette, you should let it dry completely. Squeeze the tube paint in, level it off, and then let it dry completely. And then before you paint, all the time, you should keep the colors sprayed with water. Constantly spray them with water so that the surface of the paint is always wet. If you're not going to paint for a while, just close up your palette, let it dry out, and then come back and re-wet it the next time that you want to use it. Mine stays wet pretty much all the time because I'm painting most of the time. But if I'm going away or if I want to use a different palette, I just close it up and leave it closed and then make sure I dampen it when I come back. You need a sponge for painting so that you can take the water out of your brush so it won't be you won't be adding too much water. You'll need a water container ready to go. So let's just open this up a little bit so you can see that. You see I have a little water container here. All right, so that's basically it for watercolor painting. It's a pretty easy medium as far as the materials go. Now we'll go over to the palette in a moment, but first of all we're going to identify these colors and so that you know where we're going. Okay, and I'm going to do it on this color wheel that's already painted here, just so you have some idea of the colors and what they are. So up here on my palette, let's just move over a little bit. I have permanent rose right here. Okay, And permanent rose, let's pull that down a bit so you can see it. Permanent rose is this color right here, permanent rose, okay? It's going to be that one on your color wheel. I'm going to paint this with you in just a moment, so you won't get too confused. I'm just introducing you to the colors right away. The other red is cadmium red, and that goes right here, okay? This one is a cooler red. This one is a warmer red. The warmer red leans towards the warmer yellow, and that's really significant. So the warmer yellow is cadmium yellow, and that one goes down here. And the cooler yellow is Hansa yellow light. You also have the list of materials attached to this video so that you know exactly what you need before you start to paint here. So we have a cooler yellow now that leans towards green, and a cooler blue over here that also leans towards green. And that cooler blue is Prussian blue. Prussian blue. Oh, let's just not make it quite so dark so that you can see the name through there. Okay, Prussian blue. And the warmer blue that leans towards violet along with the permanent rose is ultramarine blue or French ultramarine blue. Okay, either of those would work. I just prefer French ultramarine. Okay, so let's just go in a little bit more closely and take a look at that color wheel, those colors that we've looked at so far. So just put little dots on here, and I covered the initials of the colors that you have on your chart here. This is how you identify the color that goes in this space, okay? And just to make it a little easier, you can also write on your color wheel that this is cadmium red. You can write it in that space, and you can write permanent rose here, you can write ultramarine blue here, Prussian blue here, Hansa yellow, and cadmium yellow. Okay, so you might want to take just a few minutes out right now just to make that happen. You've got your chart ready to go, and once you have your chart ready to go, if you write the names of the colors in here, you won't get too confused about which colors go where, because the initials of the colors are telling you where they belong. Okay, they belong right next to the initials of the colors. Okay, so give you just a minute or two to write those colors in, or make sure that you have that information in front of you before we start to paint today. Coming back to our diagram, color wheel diagram, very, very important that you know what's happening when you mix your colors, because mixing colors is most of what happens when you're painting, and you need to know exactly where you're going, and you need to be able to get back to the same color mixes every time you paint. And so it's really important that you have a handle on how this is working, and you understand what's happening when you mix these colors and why things aren't going quite the way that you anticipate if they go wrong. Okay, I'm not imagining that they would, but if they do, then you need to know why. Okay, so let's start off with this side of the color wheel, this part of the color wheel, this third over here. And we'll start off with the idea of putting our reds in here. The red that is a warm red. W means warm. Okay, and so this was the cadmium red, this warm red that we're using in here. I'm just going to fill this space with red. Nobody says you have to stay inside the lines. Okay, you can do it loosely if you want to. But you notice I didn't put a whole lot of water in here. I just put a little bit on my brush and I loosened the paint a little bit. You want it to be pretty strong, pretty much full strength, but it should flow. It shouldn't be sticky. So for each of these colors, we're going to paint them quite strongly. And when you first start to paint, you usually end up having too much water in the paint. And so you can avoid that by using your sponge and making sure that when you rinse your brush out like this, you put the brush on the sponge like this. You can see that? You put your brush on the sponge to dry it out a little bit before you go into the palette to pick up the colors. If you're constantly going from the water here to the to the paint, every time you do that, you're diluting. See what I did just there? I went from the water to the paint, and every time I do that, I'm diluting the paint, and you don't need that much water in the paint today. Sometimes we do, but not for this particular subject, because we really need to see these colors clearly. So we need to see exactly what's happening with this paint today. I'm going to move over just a touch so we get that in here, and you can see exactly what's going on. Okay, so we have our cadmium red in here. So once you've painted that, you're going to put in the next color, which is cadmium yellow. And then I'm going to stop, or you should stop, until you've done that. Stop the video so that you can do this particular part, and then come back, because everybody will take a slightly different time to get this paint ready and to paint it on. This is cadmium yellow. I've written it in here. It's called CY in my book and CR. So we've got CR and CY. Okay. So go ahead and do those two. Make sure you've got those in the right place. You can stop and then come back in a few minutes when you're ready, and we'll start up again. Okay. All right, we're ready now to go on and continue with this. This is still drying a little bit, and that's okay. It doesn't matter. The color that we're going to make now is our secondary color of orange. O for orange here. Okay. And the orange is made by mixing the red and the yellow. But if you remember at the very beginning when I showed you my journal, you saw that one color, one of those colors was a middle tone and one was a light tone. So that might give you a clue that if you want an orange, you probably don't want to use quite as much of this as you do of that, because the lighter color will be overpowered by the middle tone color. So on our palette, what we're going to do is take the yellow right here, start with the yellow, this cadmium yellow that we've just put in here, just a little bit of water to make it flow, not too much. Okay, and we're going to pull in just a little of the red to make an orange. Now we want a middle of the road orange. Now we pulled in the red because the red is much darker. If you start with the red and put yellow in it, you're going to end up wasting a lot of paint, because you'll need an awful lot of yellow to make orange out of that dark red. So always start with the lighter color and put in a little of the dark when you're mixing. And that's a really good rule of thumb for watercolor mixing in general. Now I'm just going to add a touch more to make it a nice middle of the road orange. That looks like a good middle of the road orange. And we'll put that in here. Now we can get a nice bright orange like this, and this is pretty much the same color as the color I have over here, which is cadmium orange, which is made in exactly the same way, but it just happens to come from a tube. Okay, so we don't need that tube of orange. We can make our own anytime we like, and we can vary it by adding in a little bit more red or a little bit more yellow. Okay, so now we have red, yellow, and orange. Orange is our secondary color. The colors that are between the secondary color and the primary color are called tertiary colors. And so you go ahead and paint your orange now, and then we'll come back and we'll make those tertiary colors. I'll give you just a minute or two to do that. Just hold the video and then come back. Okay, now we're back again, and now we're still working in this segment of the color wheel with the warm red and the warm yellow, and we made orange by mixing those two together. Now we're going to make a yellow orange by mixing just a little bit more yellow in with the orange to make that work. Okay, so let's bring that in here, just a little bit more of that yellow, just to lighten the orange a bit. Let's just check and see if that's a good yellow orange. Yes, it's lighter than the orange, just needs a little bit more water. Lighter than the orange, but darker than the yellow. See how that's working? Maybe just a touch more paint. It feels like I haven't got quite enough paint there. It feels just a little too thin. There we go. So there should be a good transition between the yellow orange, and the orange. And I think you can probably guess what's coming next, because the next one is going to be more towards red. It's going to be a red orange. This one's a yellow-orange. We have yellow, yellow-orange, orange, and now we're going to make a red-orange. Okay, so I'm going to do that, and then you can stop the video again before we go on to one of the other segments. So a red-orange just means that we're going to use more red. And so we can pull in just a little bit more of the red into the orange mix. And we can make something that feels like a red-orange. Let's just check that and see. Is it darker than the orange? Yes, but maybe not quite enough yet. Maybe it needs just a little bit more red to balance it. There you go. Now that feels more like a red-orange. Okay, so red-orange is really important. Important that you balance these colors and make a transition that goes gradually from one color to another, all the way around the color wheel. Okay, go ahead and stop the video, make that happen, and then we'll come back to this section. Okay, now we're going to go and take a look at the cooler yellow and the cooler blue to make blues, to make greens in this area. Okay, so the cooler yellow, we have it over here, we used it initially, is Hansa yellow light actually, Hansa yellow for short. So we're going to paint that into the area where we see the cooler yellow, and it's a C for cool here. I have to clean my brush off, that's just a little bit too warm there. There we go, that's better. Just a touch more yellow. It's pretty light paint, so you need a fair amount of it. Okay, so this is a cooler yellow, this is a warmer yellow. You can see that quite clearly. And I'm just going to go through the next mixture, right, on the other side, so that we can then link those together like we did up here. And the other mixture that we want over here is Prussian blue. And then when you've got these two in, we can start mixing the secondary colors and the tertiary colors. Prussian blue is pretty strong. Okay, you want it to be pretty strong. It's a dark color. Just move it around a little bit to make it easier. And you can see it's pointing in the direction of the green. And so because it's pointing that way, we know that it will make a good green. And I'll explain why in a little bit. Okay, so we have Hansa yellow light and Prussian blue. Okay, they're both labeled in here, and they're both labeled on your chart so that you know where to put them. Go ahead and stop the video, paint those two in, and then come back, and we're going to paint the secondary and the tertiary colors from those two. Okay, you've got those two in, you've got the yellow and the blue in, and now we're going to aim for a green, a middle of the road green. This is the brightest green that we can get by mixing yellow and blue here with these two colors. So remember that we said we would use the lighter color first and just add in a little of the darker tone to make that work. So I'm going to add in just a little of the Prussian blue, which is a really strong color, into this yellow, and you can see already it's kind of overpowered that yellow, but it's a nice middle of the road green that we can put in there. You can make it just a touch more, a touch lighter if you want to, but that's just about right, I think. We'll put that in here, nice bright middle of the road green. Now when I put it on the paper, it looks a little bit too blue to me, so I'm going to add just a little bit more yellow to it to make sure that we have a green that is in the middle between yellow and blue. That's about right. So it'll go towards blue pretty quickly because the Prussian is very, very strong. So that's our green, our middle of the road green. Quite a bright green. And now if we want to make a yellow green, what we do is add a little yellow just to the edge of this mixture. Move that up so you can see it. Just to the edge of this mixture, we add a little bit of the yellow. And that gives us a nice yellow green that we can put in here. Just a touch more of the green in there, I think. So I'm going to do these two tertiary colors, a yellow-green and the blue-green on the other side. Okay, so that's our cool yellow, a yellow-green, green. Now we're going to go to a blue-green. So obviously we need just a little more blue, don't we? And so we want something that feels like a blue-green. And that's about where we want to go with that one. Make sure that this feels more blue, okay, than this green. Just maybe a touch more blue. There we go, that's probably better. Just a touch more of that turquoise feel. Okay, and now we've got our blue-green. So we've got green, blue-green, yellow-green, green, and blue-green. Okay, if your green appears to be too blue after you have painted it, you can lift it back and repaint it. You can just lift it off with a damp brush. That's about right. That's about where we want to go. You could go just a little bluer if you want to on that, just a touch, to make it just a wee bit bluer. There we go. Maybe that works better. Every time you do this, it'll be a little different. Every time you mix colors, it's going to be a little different. But that's about right. Okay, so go ahead and stop the video now and make yellow, blue, make your yellow green and your blue green and your middle of the road green, so that they're all three are different. Okay, all right, and now we're going to move on to the last section of the color wheel. And for this side, we need permanent rows for the red, the top here. And this is the cool red, and this is going to be mixed with a warm blue. On this part of the color wheel, we mix cool and warm together instead of cool and cool together and warm together. And that's correct. It's not incorrect the way it's labeled. So if you've figured that one out, then that's just the way it is with these colors. Okay, so here I'm mixing permanent rows. This is a very strong color. It will overpower every other color, so just make sure that when you start to mix the purple, it doesn't end up too red. And this is, permanent rose needs to be just a little bit stronger, a little bit less water in the mix. So the way that we make color stronger in watercolor is to add less water. The way that we make colors less strong or lighter is to use more water. And that way the white of the paper shows through. And that's how that works. Okay, so we have permanent rose in that one. And opposite that, on the other side here, we have ultramarine blue, which was or French ultramarine blue, which was the warmer of the two blues. And that one's over here. I'm going to put that in this space here. And you can see it has a little bit more of a purpley tone to it, just a touch more. You'll see it more clearly as you're painting it. Okay, so that's ultramarine blue. Okay, permanent rose and ultramarine blue. Now you'll notice that we're mixing colors in the direction that they flow towards the secondary color. And that's because we mix this color and this color together to get that color. So we're mixing in that direction. Okay, here we're mixing in this direction, and here we're mixing in this direction. By doing this, we can get the clearest secondary colors that we can with any paint mixture, any of these color mixtures. Okay, the best, brightest orange, the brightest green, and the brightest violet that we can make. And then our red violets and our tertiary colors will be equivalent. They'll be bright too. So we're going to mix ultramarine blue with permanent rose to make violet. Now, this one is darker and this one is a middle tone. So we're going to take a little of the blue into the middle tone to make this darker. And you'll see that the permanent rose tends to overpower the blue very quickly and very easily. And we want a violet that's kind of in the middle. We don't want it to be too warm and we don't want it to be too cool. We want something that's kind of in between the two. So that looks like a pretty good in the middle of the two violets. It's not pink violet or red violet. It's not blue violet. It's violet. Right? And you may have to do this a couple of times, this color wheel, to get just what you want. It's just a little dark on the screen, but it'll dry lighter. Every time you put watercolor on paper, it dries lighter. And so that has a fair amount of water in it, so it's going to dry lighter. Now, if we want to make a red violet, we're going to mix permanent rose with the violet to make the red violet. If we want to make a blue violet, we're going to mix violet with ultramarine blue. So we have that violet here already, and we can just push it towards red violet by just adding a little more of the permanent rose in it, moving that across. And let's see how that works. That works. It's just a little thin, just a little bit more paint in here, just a wee bit too thin, too much water. Okay, and that's going to be a red violet. Okay, so now you know how to make all of these colors that you can use in a variety of paintings. And we're going to do a whole lot more on the back side in a moment. Okay, and on the other side, we'll go for the blue violet. So that means we need just a little bit more of the ultramarine blue in the mix here. And we want it to read like a blue violet. And we can see that that has more blue in it than that. It could have just a little more too. It could be just a little bit bluer overall. Let's make sure that's happening. There we go. So we have that transition around the color wheel with the secondary colors in the center between the primaries and the tertiary colors on either side. Okay, go ahead and finish that off and then come back. And we're going to see what happens in a moment when you don't mix colors that lean towards each other, when you mix colors that lean away from each other. So go ahead and stop the video and finish off that part of the color wheel and then come back and we'll be ready to go. Okay, we're back now and I'm just cleaning out the palette here so I can start over with these colors again, but going in different directions this time. So let's see if we can do that. A little space here for some extra color mixing. And so what you've learned so far is that when you mix colors that lean towards each other, like this, the yellow leans towards the orange and the red leans towards the orange, those colors will be nice and bright and clear, okay, and not dull down at all. And if we mix colors in this direction, where the pink leans towards the blue, we'll get the red violet and the blue violet and the blue and the violet here, and those will also be nice, clear, bright colors. And the same thing with the greens, okay, the cooler yellow with the cooler blue will give us this range of blue greens and greens. Now what would happen if we mixed this yellow with this blue? So let's find out. We need to go to the other side of the color wheel to do that. On the other side of the color wheel, what we're going to see are different color mixtures that mix colors across the color wheel. Instead of in the direction that they go, instead of in the direction that they lean towards each other like this, we're going to actually start mixing across the color wheel to see what happens with those colors instead of going around the color wheel. Okay? And what we'll find out is that some of these colors won't stay as bright as they are, and they won't necessarily be the right exact color that we want. And oftentimes when you're color mixing, if you're not sure about how to mix colors, you get into trouble because you end up with something that we call mud. And mud is just neutral, but mud is good and neutral is good in paintings if you want it. But if you don't want it, it's not so good. And by understanding how colors mix around the color wheel like this, you can avoid that and you can get to the color you want every time, the first time, without wasting a lot of paint and getting frustrated because you can't get the color that you want. Okay, so this is a really good tool for helping you to get the colors that you want. Okay, so let's take a look at the yellows first of all. Now we mixed cadmium red last time. We'll look at the oranges to mix the red and yellow to mix the oranges. We mixed cadmium red last time with cadmium yellow to get our orange. Okay, What would happen if we mixed it with Hansa yellow? So let's find out. Here's the Hansa yellow. Here's the cadmium red. Remember, you use more of the yellow, right? And you put just a little of the red into the yellow because the yellow is lighter, right? So just pick up a little of the red and put it in here. Now you're going to get an orange, but the orange is not as bright. Can you see that already? It's a little duller, okay, than the orange that we had on the other side, which is good because it might be useful in a painting to have that little dull orange. It might be a good idea. I'm just going to put a little Hansa yellow there because that's what we use to mix it with, and a little cadmium red there because that's what we use to mix it with, just so you know. You can get variations of this. You can get a red orange by using just a little bit more red in here, just exactly the same way as you did on the front. Okay, so you can get a variation of that color. And it might be useful to have that color in a painting, but it's not really as bright and clear as this orange. Okay, and it's because we're mixing across the color wheel just a little bit. Once we get to the other end and we're mixing really across the color wheel, you'll be able to see what's happening. Permanent rose and cadmium yellow come next. So this is permanent rose over here now. I'll just move it over a little bit. And cadmium yellow, we'll put that over here so we can mix that. A bit too much red in my brush there. Okay, now pull in just a little of the permanent rose into the cadmium yellow. And again, we get an orange, but it's not the same sort of orange as we had on the front. It's more of a pinkish orange, okay? And it's good to be more of a pinkish orange because the red has more pink in it. And so permanent rose is what we're using for that, and a little cadmium yellow. So you get used to the feel of how the colors look, okay? And you can make that a yellow orange or a red orange depending on how much pink you use, just exactly the same as this. And the last possible mix in mixing across the color wheel is permanent rose and Hansa yellow. So that would be permanent rose over here. Let's just put a bit more of that over here. And as soon as I finish this, you're going to stop the video and you're going to mix these colors up, and then you're going to come back and we'll work on the greens. These are the secondary colors that we're making here. Okay, so I'm using, now I just did it the wrong way. Can you see that? I just put a little of the yellow into the red instead of using the yellow and adding the pink into the yellow. And because of that, I ended up with a really dark orange that I would have to use an awful lot of yellow in to make it work. So let's see how we can do it correctly over here. All right. So we get an orange. And again, it's a sort of pinkish orange. It's a little more transparent. It could be a little more of a yellow orange if you like, just by adding a bit more yellow. You can change that. You can change the oranges all the way across. But those oranges are nice colors. They're really good colors to use for mixing. But you need to know what's happening if you want an orange that is just a little less bright. This is the way you're going to get it. And this is Hansa yellow. And this is permanent rose. Okay, so those are the colors that you're using to make that. So go ahead and stop the video now and make those orange colors, and you can vary them across here as much as you like, and then come back and we'll work on the secondary greens. Okay. Okay, now we're back. I'm just cleaning out the palette a little bit. You just need to clean a little space on your palette so you've got space to mix up some new colors here. And let's see what happens now when we mix colors across the color wheel in the green area. Initially, we mixed the cool yellow with the cool blue, and we got a nice variety of greens in here. Okay, a cool green, a cool blue green, a yellow green, and a middle of the road green, right? Now what we're going to do is to see what happens when we mix this blue with this yellow, and this blue with that yellow also, and this yellow with this blue, to see exactly what happens. So cadmium yellow first of all, and again the lighter colors go first. Okay, so we're going to use a little cadmium yellow, and with that cadmium yellow we're going to use Prussian blue, and that's this one over here. Let's put that one over there because we'll need it again. All right, now we bring just a little of the blue into the yellow and we get a nice green, but it's a little bit more muted. Can you see how that's a little more muted than the bright green that we got initially with our first mix? Okay, it's just a little bit more of a yellow green. We could make it just a little more blue-green by adding a little more blue into it. And we can make it more of a yellow-green by adding just a little more yellow into it too. And we'll just put a little Prussian blue in there so you know what we're using to mix that. Okay. So we have a nice variety of greens here, and oftentimes these greens are better for things that you see out in the big wide world, because most of the time nature doesn't give us really bright greens. It gives us more muted greens. When you start mixing across the color wheel, you're muting the colors down. The colors are graying each other down until you get directly across the color wheel, and then you'll get a neutral gray, a sort of reddish gray or a greenish gray if you mix directly across the color wheel. So if you mix orange with blue, those are complementary colors and they will absolutely gray each other down. Violet and yellow will gray each other down, and red and green will gray each other down. And every other color that's directly opposite another color on the color wheel will do the same thing. So let's just go through the rest of the greens here. Same idea. Hansa yellow now on this one, and ultramarine blue. So let's put the Hansa yellow in first, and then add the ultramarine blue. And this is the warmer blue. So I think you can probably guess what's going to happen when you do this. You can guess that it's going to come just a little different here. And so let's add that in. Let's add a little of that into here and see what happens. We get a color that is much more muted. Okay, and we've got Hansa yellow and we've got ultramarine blue there. So it's just a little bit warmer. All right, so again, we're getting colors that are not as bright, and you can make it more of a blue-green and you can make it more of a yellow-green as you wish. But it's not going to be as bright. There's no way it can be as bright as it was before. Okay, and now we've got cadmium yellow and we've got ultramarine blue. Okay, the last two for the greens. I'm just going to put a little bit more ultramarine blue over there because we're mixing it differently. And the cadmium yellow we'll put over here, and now we can put a little of that blue in. And look what happens now. This is a really dull green, really nice green for painting foliage. But if you're looking for this green and you're getting this green, it's because you're mixing the wrong blue and the wrong yellow together. Okay, and it's even more obvious when we come to look at the purples, much more obvious. So we can see cadmium red here when we look at the purples, and you kind of got the idea now. So you can see that we're going to use cadmium red and ultramarine blue. I'll just put a little bit on the corner here so I can do that quickly for you. Okay. And cadmium red and ultramarine blue, when you mix them together, are going to make a violet, but it's not going to be a bright violet. It's going to be a very dull violet. It's a good shadow color, a good color to use. But if we're looking for something like this, which is a really bright violet, or maybe the one you can see on the other side just a little better, and we're getting something like this, which is much more muted, it's because we're mixing the wrong red and the wrong blue together. And permanent rose, same idea. Okay, I'll just use a little permanent rose here, and then I'm going to let you stop and continue, because I think now you have the idea of what we're doing. Permanent rose and Prussian blue. So let's take a little more of that permanent rose up here, move it into the Prussian blue, and this is what we get. We get a violet, but again, it's more muted. Okay, and cadmium red. Go with cadmium red again up here, and Prussian blue are the last two mixes, and I'll just clean that out a little bit so that I can make that mix for you there. A little bit of Prussian blue in there. Now what happens when we add cadmium red? This is a long way away. They're a long way away from each other on the color wheel. Cadmium red and Prussian blue are almost opposite on the color wheel. So you can expect that they will gray each other down a lot. Okay, let's have just a little bit more red in there. All right, now is that a purple or is it a brown? Well, it's kind of a dark purplish brownish color. Put a little bit more red in there. And you can see that it's a good color, it's a good shadow color, but it's not a bright purple. But we know that red and blue make purple. But it depends on the red and it depends on the blue. And so this is what this tells you, this double primary palette tells you, is that you really have to be careful about which colors you're mixing together, okay, and why. Okay, so cadmium red and Prussian blue will give you those mixtures. Okay, so go ahead now and finish that off. And then you can come back, stop the video, and then you can come back, and we're just going to add in our 2 earth tone colors so you can see a couple of other color mixtures, and then we'll be good to go. Okay, now you've finished that, you have an idea of perhaps how you've been having some issues making colors, knowing that red and blue make purple, but actually they don't if you use the wrong red and the wrong blue together. They will make nice neutral colors, but not necessarily the bright colors that you want. So that's part of the whole idea of this double primary palette, is that you can go in many different directions to get the colors that you want. And the other 2 colors that I'm going to use are the earth tone colors. Remember, there was an 8 color palette, and so far we've only used 2, 4, 6 of the 8 colors. So the other 2 colors are raw sienna, it's this one right here. It's a nice gold, nice light gold color, and burnt sienna over here. And the advantage of these 2 colors is that when you use these in paintings, and we use them in a lot of paintings, and you mix them with some of the primaries, you can get a wide variety of other colors. And the 2 colors particularly that are really useful when you're mixing and that you need in most paintings are grays and browns, or 3 colors, grays and browns and black. Okay, so we're going to leave the raw sienna. That makes nice warm skies if you put it underneath the sky in a very, very dilute way. But the burnt sienna is more useful for mixing the grays and the browns and the black. And so when you mix ultramarine blue with burnt sienna, okay, we'll put a little blue over here, add in just a little burnt sienna, you can see, because these 2 colors are opposite each other, basically burnt sienna is about here. It's a sort of reddish, brownish orange, and it's just about opposite the blue. Because they're opposite each other, they gray each other down. So we get a really neutral gray if we mix equal quantities, or just a little bit more brown, a little bit less blue. If we want a blue-gray, we can add in just a little more blue. Okay, so let's put that in here. We can say that's a blue-gray. If we want a brownish-gray, we can add in just a little bit more burnt sienna and get a warmer gray. Can you see that? And if we want a lighter gray, we just add in a little more water and just a touch more of the blue to make it blue, or we can have a middle of the road gray like that. So we've got a range of different grays we can make, and we have a range of different, using a little more of the ultramarine. We use a little more of the burnt sienna. We can make also, with the same 2 colors, a range of browns. Okay, so we can make a dark brown like this. We can make a sort of reddish brown by adding just a little more burnt sienna. Excuse me. And we can make a lighter version of that brown by adding just a little more water to the mix. So we can make grays and browns, and we can make black instantly, especially if our paints are really wet. So to make black, we're just going to take ultramarine blue right here, nice big puddle of dark ultramarine blue. And we're going to take burnt sienna, and we're going to mix the 2 together. Now, if you have enough paint and your paints are really wet, you're going to get a nice strong black right away, just like that. And it could be a blue black or it could be a brownish black. We usually call these colors darks in painting. So something really dark. Okay, so ultramarine blue and burnt sienna make these colors. And they're really useful because a combination of these colors and the ones that we have on the back of the page are really very helpful in painting. And of course you know that black, when you add water to it, it's going to give you the gray. Okay, so effectively we're back here where we started with that one. So this just gives you an idea of how to mix your colors. Hopefully that will help you to understand how colors mix and what you need to do when you're mixing colors, and why perhaps you get into a little bit of trouble when you're mixing colors, because you're not really understanding that colors have a leaning, and the leaning of the color is more important than whether it's warm or cool. It's which direction does it lean in. This yellow leans towards orange, that red leans towards orange, this red leans towards purple, this blue leans towards purple. This blue leans towards green, this yellow leans towards green. Okay, so when we lean in the correct direction for the colors, we get brighter colors. When we lean away from the direction, we get more muted colors. Now you know how to make a large variety of colors for your paintings right away, and vary those colors from light to dark by adding more paint or more water. So I'm going to just come and say goodbye to you now, and hope that you've enjoyed painting that color wheel with me, and I hope you'll be able to use that information in all of your paintings. So let's go back to the table. I'm going to leave you with this, and please practice and try lots of different colors, see how they work. But do be aware of what happens when you're using different colors. It's not just random, the way that you mix colors together. There's a lot of evidence behind this idea that if you mix colors that lean towards each other, colors that lean away from each other, you get variations of lightness, brightness, or dullness in the color. Okay, so enjoy your color mixing. Bye for now.